So, hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk SAP. This is the Talk with Expert series where I talk with wonderful minds who have been working in SAP for a very long time now. So, today we have Iran with us, and it will be great if you can just introduce uh, yourself.
Okay, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Kriegshauser. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. And I'm this weird thing called an SAP DevOps architect. So I work for a company called Basis Technologies, and we're a software automation company that focuses only on SAP. And our goal is to be able to bring automation to every part of your SAP change and release. So I essentially have a long background in software development, but not really in the SAP space. It's mostly been on the Java, C Sharp, fun web UI technologies, and Angular.js. And of course, that space has been on the agile and incremental delivery, incremental change path for a very long time, and using technologies, obviously like a source control system where you can check in and out your changes. I can have my own local branch. I can do as much development as I want to. I don't, without interfering with any other developers. And then of course, there's merge functionalities with that. And then from there, continuous integration. There's some technology out there that sees, Aaron's checked in a change. Let's go ahead and kick off a build based upon that, and let's see if Aaron has broken anything. And you do. And that's kind of where the continuous integration comes into play. It's doing that automatic build. Let's maybe spin up a container to deploy that. Used to be just deploy to another server that was sitting next to me in the room, right? But we have VMs, and then now there's Docker, containerization. So, and it's all about automation. Well, I joined Basic Technologies in 2018, and couldn't spell ABAP at that time. But I was very familiar with these other DevOps concepts, and that's what the company was trying to do.
Yeah.
The goal was to bring continuous integration, continuous delivery to SAP change and release, and I've had a lot of fun since then.
Yeah. So, I would like to just start with, do you also had issue when saying SAP instead of SAP? People generally say it's SAP, but when you come into SAP, you start realizing it's SAP and not SAP.
Really interesting. No, everyone in our circles, we say SAP. Now, if we're talking about the GUI, it's SAP GUI.
Yeah.
So it just depends in terms of where, what context we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so diving into it, how did you get into SAP DevOps architect thing? How was the path that you took?
Well, first of all, I had to learn what a transport was and why it was necessary. Why did SAP build this a long time ago? And I came from doing ERP implementations with Oracle on eBusiness Suite, so I understood the concept of dead instance and then a QA and then production, right? 3-tier landscape, if you will. And so basically moving the changes from one system to the next. There isn't really a source control, to making changes within SAP. It just doesn't lend itself to that. So therefore, the transport concept of being able to say, hey, package this set of changes, who did it, and once you say, okay, it's released, great, we lock that down. It's immutable. You can't change it, but then that's what moves to the next stop. And of course, you have to have, chain of custody, if you will, segregation of duties and those kinds of things. It's important for certain industries to have that. So I understand those concepts. So that was the first thing I learned is what is a transport and why is it necessary? Okay, from there, you can start to extrapolate what are some of the challenges you have if you're doing lots of changes and you have lots of people working on that, multiple projects. So my friend Jim, he basically put this great analogy to it. It's like we're all working on the same Word document in a shared drive on the network, and so we have to get in, get out, do our maker changes and those kinds of things. And then of course you have to go through and move it to another shared drive. And so, okay, from there you can kind of start seeing what challenges you're going to face when you're going at scale.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. So that's kind of how I got into it.
So what is Basis Technologies basically doing? It's doing something really new right now. So what is it, and what the following mission and
Yeah,
what the future aim would be?
yeah. So it's interesting you say new. We've been around for more than 20 years. We started out in Australia actually, and but our world headquarters is in London. It's been there for a long time, and I'm working at our North American headquarters here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
The goal really is, again, we talk about automation.
Mm-hmm.
Automate as much as you can the SAP release.
Yeah.
We have ActiveControl, which is a product that's been around for a long time, maybe some different names, Transport Expresso, things like that, but now it's called ActiveControl.
Right.
And it's been that way since I've been here in 2018. It's really the DevOps solution for managing change and release. This is about as soon as a transport is created, ActiveControl knows about it, and it's going to manage it through its entire life cycle. And from there, we get to be able to do some very interesting things because we're not tied down to STMS. So you can have as crazy of a release path as you want. If you can have, a single dev going into 3 or 4 different QA systems, maybe some multiple pre-prods, and then going into production, or multiple dev systems. We have one customer that runs N+6 devs. So your regular release path, your business as usual or break fix path, and then 6 other dev systems with their own QAs, and ActiveControl synchronizes all of that automatically. Sometimes they scale up to N+10. So, very agile at that point in time. So that's ultimately what ActiveControl is. It's a superset of the default change or release management system that you see in the marketplace today. I'm trying not to say its name. But it is, we can do so much more. And so most of our customers have left that other system, and they've come to ActiveControl because it was holding them back from being able to achieve their release potential. We do have another product called Testimony, and it's kind of a niche product. And what its goal is essentially to automatically build very deep regression tests for SAP without your end users knowing about it, or you have to write test scripts.
Yeah.
So we call this concept robotic test automation. There's been a lot of automation players in the marketplace. I came from a UI automation company before this. But the biggest challenge is that you got to go find out, what should we test? What are our business processes? Yeah. So, you've been developing an SAP for a long time. Can you envision every single variation of the business process you work on in production? And all the different combinations of data that could go into it? No, it's impossible. And so typically what we end up testing is the happy path. Okay, we're going to use this one particular, customer. We know all about it. We know what products it likes to buy, and those kinds of things, and what credit checks it has. And I'm speaking in the order to cash scenario. But what about all those different variations? And so robotic test automation can automatically write the test scripts based upon your actual production usage, all of your production usage. So those are kind of the 2 high-level products that we have here at Basis Technologies.
So basically, when I say new, I actually meant is still people are struggling that manual way. They just release from development.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I meant. So just to go forward, like, what is the customer when they go for SAP Go Live right now? What is the changes that they having? Like, how do they manage their production changes? And what is the existing method of managing the production changes, and what have we come up with ActiveControl? What are the changes?
So what we see a lot of customers are, they're essentially just doing it themselves, manually exporting them from a dev and importing them into a QA, through a shared drive or whatever, and then go that route. Okay, so then how do you manage that? Well, you have an Excel spreadsheet someplace, or SharePoint list or something like that, okay? And that's fine if you're just doing 7 of those transports a week. Okay. But what about your big releases? How often are you doing those big releases? Is it once a year? Is it twice a year? Quarterly? Okay. There's probably a lot going on. So now you're going to have some change and release manager who's got to keep the vision of all this. And we had this phrase: "Friends don't let friends use Excel to manage their SAP release." Right? Let's help you break away from that. But that's kind of what we're seeing in terms of the classic way. Yeah, again, there's the other change of release tool, the default one in the market from SAP, and it does some of that stuff for you, but there's still a lot of manual activities. And we run into customers who are using it, but they're still manually importing it into production because they just don't trust it. They've got to go through and look at each transport and see, okay, is this the right sequence? Is this, it has a dependency on another transport? What if there's a dependency on another transport in another SAP system? You have ECC and then, CRM or something like that, or BW. Okay. You got to keep track of those kind of dependencies if you're going to do it, manually or, through the other tool. So there's a lot can go wrong with that. And you end up having kind of this kind of fear of don't screw up.
Yeah, agreed. So when we talk about this, how does ActiveControl is helping there? Like, what exactly does it does? Okay, if we deep dive into how does the development changes move from development to the quality and then quality to production?
Yeah, so a number of things, and let's talk about goals here. What's its ActiveControl's intended purpose? We're here to eliminate technical release defects in SAP transport movements. Okay, so you think about overwrites. You have a transport that's touching an object. It hasn't been released from dev yet. You're going to go through and make the subsequent change in another transport, and then you release that one going to QA. Well, now you're basically doing an overtake, and there's a reverse of that for overwrites and to introduce a regression. So detecting those kinds of things, sequencing the transports of being imported in, dependency checks. Okay, we're here to identify through automated analysis any release defects you're going to have while you're still in dev. Okay, so there's analysis running all the time. There's over 70 analyzers in ActiveControl. Then we'll automatically import the transports for you, automatically dependent, tell you what sequence it's going to be. If there's some other non-transportable activity that has to be done on a transport, like an OS change, okay, you can track that against that transport and say, hey, make sure you do that before or after you import it into dev or QA, into pre-prod, and as well as in production. And you will ensure that is done. We'll hold back the rest of the import until that is done. Okay. What about, do you work with CDS views at all? Yeah. Okay. So those take time to rebuild, correct? Yeah. Can be really, really expensive, time-wise. So should the rest of the imports be held up until that CDS view is being rebuilt? Okay. So therefore, you can allow for parallelization in those situations and say, hey, this other stuff doesn't have a dependency on that CDS view, let it go through. Okay. So there's those kinds of things. A lot of functionality. Typically, we give the first hour of demo for ActiveControl, and then we say, okay, time out. You guys need to go get a break, absorb everything you've seen. Let's go do this again, and let's come up with us. Ask us some tough questions, and we're going to go through that. Yeah. But the biggest thing is that through automation, throughout the entire process, ActiveControl is going to be in charge, and it knows everything, keeps track of everything. Who needs to be approving it at what stage? When do you need a test result saved against it? Those kinds of things. We're going to basically control the entire workflow. And if there's a problem with a bad import into production, then we can back out that release with the click of a button. So that's a fantastic insurance policy for our customers, because we've talked to some people and say, okay, what happens if you have a P1 outage? And, how much money are you losing when your SAP production system is down per hour? Some companies say $1 million, right? I mean, that's that. You talk about fear of not screwing up because of that. Okay. You want to come home at the end of the day and go, talk to your wife or partner or whatever and say, I cost the company $1 million today. And it can easily happen, right? Yeah. So therefore, an insurance policy just kind of recover quickly. So, but a lot of stuff like that.
So as we talk, like it's more like how the continuous integration works and how the continuous development is working and how the
Yeah.
integration works. So basically, we have been already talking about it, but can you like just give some more light on how it goes? What is continuous integration, continuous development, and what is actually integration? What is it? Can you just give
Yeah. So integration means different things to different people. So you can think about from continuous integration. Let's go back to the other analogy of me, my past life, right? I create a local branch of the source code. Now, the beautiful thing about typically, non-SAP development is that I can actually build the entire application on my own local workstation, make changes to it, mess it up as much as I want. It doesn't affect anyone else. We can't do that in SAP. It's just too big, So therefore, as I'm going through and making those changes, once I actually commit those changes to be merged in with the other mainline development, that code merge, you can think of that as continuous integration at that point in time. But it's also the automated analysis, because one of the benefits I got out of being a Java developer is that I had this thing called compile.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't have that in SAP. You don't know until you actually put it in the next system and run it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're going through a faith that it's going to work out okay. So that part of the compiler is part of that continuous integration. You always want to build every once in a while. If you start writing code, especially early on, you're building all the time because you don't trust what you're writing and you're still figuring out how to be a programmer. Well, but how do you do that with SAP? Again, you got to go move in the next system and say, did it work? And that's why you get into these transporter copies situations, because, hey, let's go try it in QA, but don't, release that transport, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to go back and remediate it and try it again. Okay. So what if you had an automated analysis that just ran and just was looking for those type of issues, those challenges? Okay. So let's put a real specific example. You're creating a new table. Okay. Great. You have a transport that's going to be creating that new table. And then you have a configuration transport that's going to inject data into that new table. Okay. Now, you as a developer, you know the relationship between those two transports, right? And you understand the order of the dependencies and the order in which they should be, imported in. But you work with a large team of ABAP developers, right? A lot of changes are happening at once. What if someone else, came along and saw that new table and had the task of, creating the transports for the customizing transports, inject the data into it? And he assumed that, it's going to go. And he assumed that that table is going to be there in QA, right? And so the release manager goes, okay, great. You import it in, it blows up because it's not there. You have that missing dependency. So I ask customers all the time, and I say this, hey guys, you have a set of transports that work great in QA, but you import them into dev or production, and then, you got a failure because you forgot to bring on a long transport, okay? That's classic challenges you face. Well, with automated analysis, we're going to ensure that customizing transport cannot move forward unless that table's in the next system or it's part of that release. Okay, those two transports are going to import in together. So you have that automated analysis, and that kind of gets back to my compiler type thing, that it's always happening. It's always happening. And that's continuous integration at this very specific example of that. Okay. So I think you're wanting to talk about integrating different SAP systems, okay, and how is that continuously done? Well, let's think about ABAP changes in like an ECC as well as for a BW. Okay, you have two transports. They're talking to the same business requirement, essentially. They fall under that same umbrella, but they kind of have to go locked together. Then so that is kind of an integration standpoint where that logic has to go along and move along with the respective dev, QA, pre-prod, and production. So we're going to continually watch that and make sure that those dependencies, are moving in lockstep together. So it's continually being looked at, and that's part of our automated analysis.
Okay.
With me so far?
Yeah.
Maybe it's an RFC call, those kinds of things as well, to some other kind of function module or something like that.
Yeah, so
Two.
what is happening here? Like, is it already checking something in quality? How does it come that there will be an issue? Like, how is Active Control actually working there? Just
Yeah. So in that regard, ActiveControl has this concept of what we call business task.
yeah,
Think of it as like a user story, okay? Or maybe it's a ServiceNow ticket for fixing this functionality in ECC and BW, okay? But it's an overall business change. It's not really tied to a specific technology, whether it's ECC, S4HANA, PO, whatever, it doesn't matter. It'll know about the transports that are necessary for those systems. Okay, so you have to go create an ECC transport, you associate it to that business task. You go create a BW transport, you associate it with that business task. Now ActiveControl says, hey, these changes are related. And so we understand the linkage between ECC dev and BW dev, ECC QA, BW QA, pre-prod, etc. So therefore, we expect those related transports to move and import together. Okay.
yeah, okay,
So that's how ActiveControl tracks all of that, because it's at the business task level.
okay.
Yeah.
So to be honest, I was that guy who used to break all my toys and see how it actually works. That works for me when I try to learn or understand any technology as well.
Yep.
So can you give me about the architecture of Active Control, like how it works? Because it is just boggling me out how it is going to do everything. It's really exciting.
Yeah. So ActiveControl is an ABAP add-on. We delivered via transports. There's an ActiveControl server, what we call domain controller, and that typically is installed in Solution Manager. It's a good place to be installed on because a Solution Manager probably has RFC destinations to all the ECC environments, everything like that. Okay, and then so we install them there in our own namespace. Then you're going to install a transport into all of your satellite systems that ActiveControl is going to control. Excuse me. And therefore, we set up essentially targets, okay, within ActiveControl, set up the release paths. Again, we're not using STMS routes, okay? So we control our own. And through drag and drop, you set up the release paths. Okay, it's very slick to do that. And then ActiveControl is essentially watching what's happening. So if you go through and you save a transport, okay, ActiveControl is going to throw up a dialog in SE38, for example, or if you're using an Eclipse, we're going to do that. We're going to ask you, number one, what business task does this belong to? Okay, what does that change? Now, that business task could have been originated from a ServiceNow ticket or a Jira ticket or something like that. Okay, so there's a linkage to those things. But it's like, what's the overall change? And then what's the release path for this thing going to be? You can have multiple different release paths coming from dev all the way to production, especially if you're doing multiple clients on a dev system, right? So you could do that. So which one is that? And then maybe a little more detail about the change. Is this an emergency change? Is this priority? What functional group does this belong to? Those kinds of things. So as soon as it happens, ActiveControl is going to run analysis. We're going to look for, hey, are you touching the same object as anyone else right now? We just want to let you know about it. We're not going to hold you back. If you're running an M+1, if someone's touching an object in the other dev environment, okay, we're going to let you know, hey, Gary over there is touching the same object, just so you know.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not going to hold you back. We don't know who's going to get to production first and set the standard, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. But running analysis. And then that's all the developer really needs to do, other than go into ActiveControl, because he's going to get an email saying, hey, can you go enter a test result, a unit test result saying that you've actually ran this thing in dev? Okay. All right. And then at that point in time, ActiveControl manages the workflow. And depending upon what the next step is when your designed release path. So you can have a peer review where someone else in your team, a team leader, scrum master, whatever it would be, gets an email. Hey, go look at the stuff that Aaron just created and approve it. And again, we're going to run an automated analysis. And then so long as everything approves through, we can then let it be automatically imported into QA if you so wished. Okay. Or you can have a staging to go through and look at the stuff and bless it before it goes in to QA, those kinds of things. And then we're going to go just run through the approval mechanism. And if everything's okay, you can just release it into production.
Okay. Makes sense.
If you want to go that fast, okay, or you can do like a regular cab approval, Thursdays at 10 o'clock, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. So, do we not need to maintain the transport routes anymore more if we are using ActiveControl, like because it's
Nope.
already maintained? Oh, that's
Nope.
great.
Nope. And the beautiful thing is, if you're going to make a change to it,
Yeah.
let's say you're going to add a training system that's going to retrofit or automatically merge the transports after they're imported into production to the training system. If you make that change to the release path, no one has to log off of the system.
Okay.
Okay, just like that. And as well as we'll say, hey, by the way, that training system is missing these 400 some transports that have been imported into production. Do you want me to bring those over now?
Yeah.
Okay, it keeps track of everything.
So that is awesome. So it sounds great to me and it's really exciting. But I will ask directly that what are the challenges that we face with ActiveControl in the initial days when we are talking about the real-time environment?
Probably humans saying, hey, this is new. I don't like new.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
And then that's what some of my customers, they say, hey, it works great. It's just that we've got 1,000 users that we've got to go through and explain why we made a change. And, they've been doing this other way for a very long time. It's the human side of a different tool, a different way of thinking, those kinds of. What we typically do during an implementation is we ask, what are you doing today? And do you want to continue to work that same way? Right? And just basically put it in just what you're doing. There's still going to be automation that's happening behind the scenes, and you're going to get benefit. And then the customers will say, yes, let's do that. And over time, once there's been trust built with ActiveControl, it's actually doing the things that we said it was going to do and working for them, then your team starts to go, okay, can we go a little faster? Let me give you an example of Granger, a customer of mine. They have been traditionally a conservative company in terms of making change. Let's say Thursdays at 10 o'clock. That's when they do their weekly changes. And they were on ActiveControl for more than a year. And then they said, can we go faster? And there's people that are going, no, you're crazy. Why would you want to do that? That's just going to basically be problematic. Yeah. Okay, well, let's see if we can. And so they went through and they said, look, they created a list of changes, safe changes that could be, label changes on a report, maybe some configuration changes of certain types of, areas, maybe a change to a certain module that is really isolated. So, there's no other dependencies at that point. And so if you mark those as those types of changes, then basically there's a different workflow that's triggered that you can say, okay, so long as people get the email, Aaron, go approve this before it leaves dev. Okay, I went in, looked at it. Okay, I approve. Now it goes in the next step and says, okay, someone approved this before it gets imported into QA. Okay, I approve it. Great. And now it's going to be, we have like a job that runs every 5 minutes for that type of change, imported into QA. Again, someone gets an email, go through and approve it. And then the same thing happens with production. So long as it meets all of those approvals and our technical analysis we run automatically, now they're like, okay, it can release, as at will into production during the day. And they came by our booth at an ASUG in Chicago, and they said this was huge for them, absolutely transformational, because they would never, ever think to do that like a year ago. And now they're actually getting into Agile release.
Yeah, that's great to hear. But a lot of question comes into mind when it is like how the roadmap of ActiveControl looks like, and into deep dive technical perspective. Like for example, how when we are transporting, is it shared with the co files and the other files that are generated? Are they shared within the same location, or how the mount points work there? Can we dive into a bit of how the technicalities goes when we are implementing this, and what does the roadmap look like?
Well, we use standard standard TMS imports. Okay, so we're just basically using the same protocols. Okay, you can go in and look at the log files. We'll keep track of that. So we're doing it as the same co-file, sort of thing. But let's talk about some of the new functionalities coming out from SAP, BTP, right? Business Technology Platform. And right now we have I think the goal here really from SAP is that, as I understand it, and someone can have a totally different interpretation of what SAP's goals are, including SAP from one day to the next. But when they're looking at, hey, how can we give them, our customers tooling to be able to make their own customizing changes, but give them in a space that is not making changes to the core, like the S/4HANA. Okay, so let's encourage them to build their own cool front ends, if you will, in Fiori or whatever technology, BTP doing this sort of thing, but leave the core S/4HANA system intact and not making as much customizing changes there, but do it in your own application. So this is this concept of what's a microservice. Okay, let's break this monolithic application where we just continue to add more and more complexity onto it. Let's go through and separate that into a layer of abstraction, creating your own separate application that just kind of talks to the back end, right? So we're seeing, that's the future of that. Well, how does ActiveControl play there? Because some of that technology can be used in a source control system, like Git, right? Fiori changes can, those kind of stuff, right? Obviously JavaScript files, all that. But you're still going to have need for a dev S/4HANA server, a QA S/4HANA server, and then, production one. And then how do those technologies marry together? And when do you need to actually start creating transportable changes for those other, pieces of technology, and to be able to ensure that they go lockstep together? And that's where ActiveControl will participate.
Okay. So, one more question comes into mind when how are we going to, when we are performing some transport range changes, and they can be after the whole go live of ActiveControl has happened in our landscape, and we want some transport route changes. So how does that work? Like, do we need a continuous help from ActiveControl team, or we are trained for?
No. Our goal is to have you be self-sufficient. So, we can get you up, if it's just S/4HANA, we can get you up in a matter of weeks. Okay. And honestly, the time it's going to take them, most time is sitting together and doing a blueprinting session. Say, what do you want your release workflow to be? What analysis do you want it to happen? Is there any advanced skipping rules for certain situations? These kinds of things. Okay. And it's essentially everyone going, okay, let me think. Okay, who needs to be approval for these type of changes? Okay, who's the delegate? The backup approver if that person goes on vacation, those kinds of things. What kind of security, segregation of duties, concerns you need to have. Okay, that sort of thing. But implementing it is actually pretty easy. Get the transports installed, and honestly, sometimes it's hard just to get the transports installed because you're using the old transport import technology. Okay, once you're on ActiveControl, it gets easier, but and then we're going to sit down with you over a Google Meet or Teams meeting or whatever it would be. And, if you're the designated administrator, and again, it's not a full-time role, but if you're the point person for doing this, we're going to look over your shoulder and kind of guide you through it. We're going to create a screenshot of every change you make. Okay. And that's going to be a living document, but we're going to teach you, you're going to be the one building that release path. Right. And then after go live, there's training involved in that and cut over and those kinds of things. And if we need to go through and bring over the in-flight transports and from another technology, we can do that. But there's post go live hypercare for 2 months. If you have anything, just call up Joey. Okay, yeah. He'll hop on as soon as he can. Okay, what's going on? All right, and take a look at it. And again, we have 24/7 support as well. So it's actually pretty lightweight to manage.
Sounds great to have in the landscape. Let's talk about the other product as well, the robotic test automation that we have. What does that do, and how we are integrating that in our landscape? How does that sound?
Yeah. So with testimony, again, it's there for specific purposes, and you'll understand why as I kind of dig into the details on it. Testimony, again, it's an ABAP solution. Typically, it's installed in Solution Manager, which is a good place to put it. But essentially, you're going to put a couple transports ultimately in your production system. And then 6 a.m. on a regular day, you're going to turn on, you're going to start recording. It's server-side recording, and it's seeing every transaction. Every transaction. All the GUI transactions, all of the batch jobs, BOPs, all that, RFC calls, coming in, web service calls. Okay. So we see everything, all the, in and out parameters. Okay. Now then, our goal here is to play back that recording and identify, what's different based upon some transports your month for your monthly release, service pack, an upgrade, if you will, and then to tell you what was different. And so our goal there is to play back the entire period of business that we recorded. Okay. Let's say you did a 12-hour recording. We're going to play back the entire 12 hours and tell you what was different. So what do you need? Let me ask you, what do you think you need to play that back? Sure. Can we do play back on prod and repeat the Yeah, right. So you need another environment. And essentially, when you do that, then you're going to have something that can play back that amount of work, okay, that load. So you're going to have kind of a clone of your production system. Okay. With a full database of what it was at that point in time when recording started. Because we're going to play back the entire period of business. So think about your production environment for ECC, okay? How many app servers are you running, right? You don't have to just think about that, okay, 10, 20, 90, okay? What's the size of your database, okay? What database technology are you running on? Okay, when you start thinking about that, you're like, okay, well, we got to go create a clone of production. For some companies, it's easier to do that than it is for others. Okay, we don't create the clone for you. That's not what Testimony does. Your basis team is going to do all of that. It's going to, but if you're on a hyper accelerator like AWS, Google, Azure, okay, maybe that's pretty easy to go through and do that, streamlined. But if you're on premise, if you're on DB2 or Oracle, okay, it's a challenge. Or, what if you have like a 90 terabyte database? That's big, Okay, so certain situations, it makes a lot of sense. We run into customers that they do all manual testing today, and they just go, it's test and pray that they did enough. And then guess what? We're going to upgrade or whatever, and we're just going to deal with the problems as they come up after we go live. So, okay, but why aren't they using automated testing? Through Tricentis or something like that, or Worksoft, or UFT, right? Well, you have to have people to go build those tests, first of all, and then identify them. That's a huge challenge. Build them, maintain them, test data management. That's a whole other challenge, right? Making sure that you can have repeatable tests, burning up test data, and then maintaining it. So we've seen very large companies spend a lot of money, set up a testing center of excellence, to set up the standards and those kinds of things. And that's what's necessary, because testing it's a Herculean task. You go through and do that. And a lot of times you're pulling people from the business to come in and test, and they're like, I've got a day job. Okay, I'll do this once, but I don't want to go through this upgrade ever again. Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, but we have to, because SAP says we have to. Okay, so it's tough. What do you do? So therefore, customers go, this is intriguing. Let's invest in the technology to ensure that we can actually go through and set up this testing environment, if you will. And it's not necessarily your QA system, okay? Because when you play it all back, you're going to burn up all that test data. And in order to play it back again, you need to restore back to what it was, to that 6 a.m. at that time. Okay. So I was rambling a little bit, but I want to paint the picture of what robotic test automation is, and then who is suitable to use it, and who needs it at that point in time.
Agreed. So as exciting as it sounds, it comes with something like, how to get ourselves trained into it, So how can I start getting trained into ActiveControl today? For example, we are going to implement in future, or, in the near future, but how we are going to learn it?
Yeah. So this is what it's really, hey, buy it and ask us to install it. and we'll teach you how to use it, and then we'll help you to go live with it, and then we'll support you after that.
Okay.
That's how our customers go through and get started with ActiveControl. So some customers will go through and say, okay, great, can we start with a couple of systems, right, and do a pilot, if you will. Okay, fantastic, we'll do that. Some customers have an event coming up where, for whatever reasons that they have with a relationship with SAP, they need to make a move regardless. And so they say, okay, they'll do the due diligence. They'll talk to our other existing customers, reference. Maybe they've hired someone who's used ActiveControl in the past. Okay. And they say, guys, this really, really works. Let's bring this in. That happens as well. And so they say, let's just go with it. And so we'll help them go live. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. ActiveControl just kind of works, and there isn't really where you have to spend a lot of time to go through and get the most out of it. We'll set it up so it just kind of works for you automatically. And every once in a while, you want to make a change to your release paths and these kinds of things, or add some extra analysis, turn on an analyzer at some point in the workflow. It's not something that you are going to be working in every single day, making changes and making it better. It's just part of your release workflow, and say, hey, at some point in time, you're going to get an email saying, hey, go test this or go prove this. Yeah. Okay. And then that's it. It's just going to work. So there isn't really go through and pull down a trial version and install it, because it's just not meant for that sort of thing. But yeah, I guess to summarize, come talk to me. Hey, I want to learn more about it. Guess what? I'm going to help you learn a lot about it.
Yeah. So I'll just put your LinkedIn ID over here so that people can just approach you directly.
Please. Yeah, I'll be happy to set up time, do a demo, walk through it, answer all of your questions.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we are almost at the end, but I have a personal questions to ask. Like, all this we are doing, it's just basically making our work easy, but also make a lot of jobs that will be not required anymore. Like for the testers, what they're doing. So people want to move to SAP, DevOps, or DevOps as specific. So what will be the roadmap for that? Like how to learn the DevOps roadmap, if you.
Yeah. So it kind of depends on who you are right now and where you're wanting to get to. Yeah. One of the things, so let's say you've been working SAP for a long time, been doing classic waterfall releases, okay, and for years. You're like, hey, Aaron, what's this DevOps thing all about? Reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you on that. Secondly, there's some tons of stuff on YouTube about DevOps in general, okay? Especially in the non-SAP space, there's tons of things out there. We have literature on our website that discusses, ebooks. We have lots of webinars that talk about DevOps. What I really enjoyed was the Phoenix project from IT Revolution, Gene Kim. Right. Okay, have you heard about that book?
No, not yet.
Okay, so it's a fictional story, but it's about a company, Parts Unlimited, who they're not necessarily running SAP. Okay, just put that out there. But they were doing classic in-store retail, okay, as well as probably some direct shipments to customers. But they're trying to create an online premise and basically capture market share. Yeah. And so the Phoenix project was this new online e-commerce platform, and it went really bad, where they broke everything and they couldn't actually go through and take orders. There was no compliance. It was all bad. Okay. And so from them transforming themselves internally, saying how can we do better? And then thinking of different concepts based upon lean manufacturing from Toyota back in the 80s, right? How the goal is to have very good quality and continuous flow of the assembly line, if you will. If there's a problem, someone could pull a cord, stop the assembly line, and everyone got there and looked at it. And until they come up with a solution, they're not going to turn on this assembly line anymore. No bad quality. It's going to come out of here. Continuously improvement, those kinds of things. And how they basically took these principles and started implementing DevOps, automating some of the development, automating the operation side was a huge part of it. There was this guy, Brent, who was the guy who knew how to deploy the code everywhere. So you think about this as your basis people who are the ones that do the imports, okay? They're the constraint. How do we automate that aspect of it, okay? So it's a great book. Honestly, coming from IT, seeing those horror stories and the stress that people are going through made me feel kind of queasy reading it. But it's a lot of fun though going through. So I go that route, and then start thinking about what where can we find speed improvements in our current release. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm starting a new series, a video series, quick videos, less than 2 minutes of DevOps tips for SAP, and I'm going to discuss all of these kinds of things as well through there. So I've done one so far. My challenge is to do another one over the weekend and get this ball rolling.
Yeah. I'm also excited for it. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's all from my end. Thank you very much for coming and agreeing to show everything
Yeah,
about ActiveControl.
fantastic way to spend a Saturday morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.